We're born to belong. Share. Born to belong. Slowing down, then connecting. Born to belong. Anybody else now? Reaching out now. Born to belong. Gratefulness, born to belong.
Be happy.
Be happy, 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 happy. 3 more times. Born to belong. Born to belong. Thank you.
Vibrational music.
Born to belong. Born to belong. Good job.
Oh my goodness. Enough said. But you know I'm going to say more. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm going to move a little over this way. I feel like I'm a little off center. A little closer to center, you know? What's that? Always returning to center. That's right. Never centered, always returning to center. Well, good morning, everyone. You know, it's a delight for me to come and look out here because when I sat down, there's only about 5 of you here. And it's nice to see everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're in a series of studies, a series of lessons that we began last week based on this amazing book called The Bond by Lynn McTaggart. And the new subtitle is How to Fix Your Falling Down World. And the old subtitle is also very good, Connecting Through the Space Between Us. And the way we fix our falling down world, of course, is connecting through the space between us. That's pretty obvious. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that today and the significance of that in our experiences and in our lives. And as I think about this idea of the bond, I came across a wonderful story that kind of talks a little bit about a bond. It's not exactly the kind of bond that we're talking about, but I thought it was a pretty good story about the bond. And the bond is, there was a story of following an incident that won the runner-up prize in the 1999 Darwin Awards. And so it turned out a happy ending, so just to give you an awareness, I say a happy ending, the person actually survived. Which sometimes they don't, but in Vermont, a native found himself in a difficult position while touring the Eagle Rock African Safari Zoo with a group of thespians from St. Petersburg, Russia. He went overboard to actually show them one of America's most amazing marvels called crazy glue. And he wanted to demonstrate to them how amazingly powerfully strong this glue was. So apparently he put some on the palms of his hands, and while at the zoo, he put his hands on the rump of a rhinoceros. Just to show how strong it was. You know how strong a rhinoceros is, of course, right? Yeah, so anyway, for a while, the rhinoceros didn't think too much about it until it became evident and clear that this man was actually stuck to his rump. And at that point, the rhinoceros went crazy and went wild and just started really just running all over the place, dragging the poor man all over the place behind him. And one of the things that the article says is that the rhinoceros had been having some digestive challenges. Yeah, well, and it goes into great detail on how that was handled during this experience, but apparently they had to have several shovels to help keep the guy from suffocating. And I know, it's terrible, isn't it? Now, this is not the kind of bond that we're talking about, folks, so I just want to be very clear about that. However, sometimes when we find ourselves stuck to and attached to certain things in our lives, there are going to be experiences where we get dirty. Wouldn't you agree? So that's really my point of telling this story, is that it's important to recognize that each and every one of us has a bond, and not only do we have a bond, it's so important and so significant that we participate in that bond, and yet at the same time, it's also important for us to recognize the difference between having a bond with someone and being in bondage. Wouldn't you agree? And that's a really valuable understanding and awareness. You see, one of the things that we are talking about here is this amazing connection that we all have that we sometimes don't remember because we live in a culture that's basically everything seems to be geared toward the hero of the individual. You know, there's this idea that somehow that, and I know this is very strong actually in many cultures, but it's strong here in this area, and it's strong and there's this idea that somehow that we're supposed to all pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. Right? Everybody's supposed to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. But one of the things that doesn't recognize or point out is that somebody originally bought that first pair of boots and gave it to you. You didn't have your first pair of boots yourself, most of the time. I won't say it's always true. And even if you did, this whole idea that somehow you're going to pick yourself up by your own bootstraps is totally fallacious. I'd like to see somebody try it. Have you ever seen anybody actually pull themselves up off the ground by their bootstraps? Now, we're talking levitation here, folks. I mean, come on. So seriously, I mean, it's something that we have brought into our culture that somehow that everything we're supposed to be able to do everything by ourselves individually. And it's just not the truth. It's just not the truth. And it's just this idea that somehow we're all going to be able to be these individuals that are the champions of everything. But the reality is we are the champions of our lives, but not in an isolation, not alone. See, deep connection rather than competition is the quality that is most essential to our human nature. We were never meant to live a life of isolation. And self-serving survival is actually a good recipe for having all of the illnesses and diseases of our culture. Human beings have a deep need to connect, just to get along, just to survive, just to be able to get through life and through this world. So one of the things that I talk about in terms of our spiritual unfoldment and development is an understanding that we are all on a spiritual path, and not a single one of us, no one can actually walk your spiritual path for you. This is true. Nobody can walk your spiritual path for you. You have to walk your own spiritual path. Your life is your spiritual path. Nobody can live your life for you. But the reality is nobody can actually make it along their spiritual path by themselves alone. You can't walk your path alone. The reality is the more you actually try to significantly isolate yourself from those around you that are there both to challenge you and to lift you up, you're going to get stuck somewhere on that path without that. Isn't it true? Sometimes we need people in our lives to show us that there's another step that we need to be taking. And sometimes we need someone in our lives to be right behind us, giving us a good stiff kick in the, to say, move along now. And they both can be a blessing in our lives. And one of the most significant things for us to do is to recognize the value of that, the connection that we have, the value of really being in a place where we are recognizing not only our oneness, but our need for connection. German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche proposed that the driving force of all human motivation is a will to power. A will to power. We see that an awful lot of times. There is a great need, it seems, in many in this country and in our world, this need for power. That the will is to have power, is to have dominion, to dominate. And yet the latest scientific research, rather than a will to power, our most powerful and strongest need is ultimately a need to connect. Research has shown that people will give up power in so many ways if they feel they do not have an opportunity and ability to connect with others. We'll give up, even for that matter, it's been shown over and over again, humans will give up their lives just simply for the ability and the need to connect. So even the survival need is superseded by a need for connection in the majority of humans in this world. And I would suggest on some level, all of us have this. And research has shown over and over again that when we try to isolate ourselves from our community, we are being given lots of opportunities to discover how that doesn't work. You follow me? I wanted to read just a little bit from her work here and some of the understandings that are being presented for us. She says, this impulse to seek connection has 4 signatures in our society: a need to belong, a need to agree, a need to give, and a need for fairness. They're hardwired in our basic biology. These impulses get revealed in the connections that we make with our nearest and dearest, as well as with every person with whom we come in contact. And that's especially, this is true, I think, whether we are someone, this is someone that we're in agreement with, or for that matter, someone who we're in disagreement with. Interestingly enough, we still have a connection with all those people that we don't like very much. And there's no way to escape it. Now, we may choose to make other decisions about where we spend our time and energy. We may choose to make other decisions about that, but the reality is we are always, see, I've often taught workshops on relationships, and it's because it's one of the most valuable things in my life, and it's also one of the things I need to grow most in. It's true, I think, for most of us. Ram Dass, one of my teachers, says that relationships are the highest yoga. So if you really want to know more about yourself, be in a relationship. And I think that's especially true for marriage. And so you learn more about yourself in a relationship than you do in any other way. We really learn more about our true natures by being able to see ourselves through the eyes of those around us and through the experiences of those around us. We are connected in ways that we don't even realize. Now, that's not to say that if you are not in a, quote, relationship, that you don't have relationships. It's important to recognize that. The other thing that I have learned over the years is that even though you're no longer in, let's say you have an experience of being divorced, you are still in a relationship with that person. Do you realize that? It doesn't matter whether you never see them again. It doesn't matter whether, in all honesty, that they've passed on to another plane of living. It doesn't matter. You are still in a relationship with them. There's still a bond and a connection with that energy, that consciousness, that person, that being in some form, in some way. The question is not whether you're going to be in a relationship. The question is, for you, for me, for all of us, what kind of relationship am I going to have? And you know, the powerful thing about that is it's not even a question of, the reality is you have no control over the kind of relationship that other person has with you. See, we want to change that. We want to change the relationship they have with us, right? And we're wasting our time and energy because you will never change the relationship that they have with you unless you're willing to change the relationship you have with them. Now, even then, there's no guarantee. And that's still our work. Our work is never to try and get someone else to be in a relationship with us in a certain way. Our work is really to honor and to be in a relationship with an other, if you want to call it other, in a way that it reflects back to us the kind of experience that we want to have in our own selves. Does that make sense? The principle in the law is very simple. Jesus said, whatever you sow, you reap. It's very simple. The energy that we put out is what we're responsible for. And so the more we are in a place where we put out the kind of energy that we truly want to experience and the kind of connection that we want to have in life, there is the gift of experiencing our true wholeness and our oneness in life. Well, one of the studies that she gives some great quotes of different studies that have been done about this idea, this understanding of our need for these relationships, these need for connections, and so one of the things that's pointed out is that a study was done of primarily Japanese people who had moved to other countries and other cultures. What they found is in Japanese in their own culture where they have much less heart disease, they have much fewer rates of cancer than most other cultures. But what they found is, which was fascinating, is that there are many, many Japanese men who have moved to Hawaii and California and other places around the world. And what they found is that the rate of heart disease and the rate of cancer increased significantly when they move into other cultures. But they really couldn't determine whether it really was an effect of the environment around them, what they're eating, their lifestyle, or if it really was some other factor. And so there was a sociologist who really looked at this, and what he found was that those Japanese men, and primarily this study was done with men, the Japanese men who maintained their sense of community and connection with their culture, who maintain the sense of connection that they had in this way, didn't have the increase in heart disease, didn't have the increase in cancer. They maintained a healthy experience. It had nothing to do whether they ate Big Macs or tofu. It had to do with feeling a place of connection and oneness with who they were and with their community. And so the sense of community was even more important to health than in any of the other health factors that we tend to. And there's numerous studies that actually pointed this out. A sense of community, a sense of connection, a sense of belonging is more important to our health than things that we eat, the things that we drink. And the reality is they will influence all of those things as well, won't they? So this is one of the things for you to be conscious and aware of, for all of us to be conscious and aware of, is that it's not just a nice thing to come and participate and connect with others. We need it from a health perspective. We need to experience that. There's something in that that allows us to experience more health and wholeness in our physical body, in our mental, emotional. And a big part of that, of course, has to do with not having the same kind of stress. Those who are not really feeling connected have an amazing level of stress. Wouldn't you agree? Anybody know what I'm talking about? I think we all have at times when we really felt alone, isolated, not with others. And yet, during those times, we find ourselves usually the most stressed. Now, there are times when we're really stressed when we're with others, don't get me wrong. And there's a difference there. Interestingly enough, many of the studies have shown that the connection that we have, the community that we have, it really doesn't matter as much whether it is a absolutely harmonious connection. The important thing is to have a connection. Sometimes, even being with people who you argue with is healthier for you than being alone. Do you realize that? Isn't that amazing? Studies have shown that being in a connection, in a relationship with those who you have difficulties with and challenges with actually is better for your health than being alone. Pretty fascinating, interesting awareness. In Proverbs chapter 18, verse 1, whosoever isolates himself seeks his own desire. He breaks out against all sound judgment. So every man for himself attitude fostered in the West, particularly in American society, can actually prove deadly to us, particularly in our hearts. So numerous studies show that people who are self-absorbed, cynical, and hostile to the world are more likely to die from heart attack. One of the things that she points out is that connection protects us against stroke, depression, even the common cold. And so one study concluded that relationships of any sort, good or bad, improve your odds of survival by 50%. Let me say that again, because this is really a valuable awareness. Relationships of any sort, good or bad, improve our odds of survival by 50%. And so this social bond that we have protects us even in hard times, even in difficult, challenging situations. And one of the things is that this kind of breaks, one of the questions that was looked at was does this social economic status matter in this situation? And except in those situations of people who are in extreme poverty, economics didn't matter. It didn't matter whether you were multimillionaire, billionaire, or whether you were middle class, or whether you were lower income. As long as you were not in that level, below that level of poverty, you still had better chance of surviving if you're in a connection and in community than if you are isolated. In many ways, some of the wealthiest people in our country actually have some of the biggest health challenges, and one of the reasons is that they may be extremely wealthy, but there are those who are extremely wealthy who do not have the kinds of connections and relationships that others have. And the other interesting thing of the study is this: even in those situations where there is disparity and if a community has a somewhat similar economics, you might say, they're on a kind of a similar level, they're much happier and they're much healthier than if there's a big disparity, because there's this disconnect. There's a disconnect, and there's also a sense of unfairness that people experience. And it creates stress, and it creates challenges, and it creates problems in our lives. In Psalms chapter 73:23, it says, "Nevertheless, I am continually with you. You hold my right hand." This is one of the things that I have to say for myself that has been one of the most valuable and important, significant spiritual teachings that I have experienced in my life when I came into unity. There's a powerful understanding in unity that no matter where you go, no matter what you do, no matter where you are in your life, you're never alone. You see, there is a connection, a spiritual power, a loving presence. There is a beauty and a power that is always available in any circumstance or situation that we can turn to. And two things that have been shown to be most relevant for our health and well-being in this life have to do with having an inner connection and an outer connection. Having spiritual connection and a community connection. It's two of the best things you can do for yourself in terms of your health. You realize that? It's two of the best things you can do for yourself in terms of your happiness. It's two of the best things you can do for yourself for our overall well-being. And I think both are significant and important. In some ways, having that awareness and that inner connection of connecting with our true nature, with the Spirit of God within us, with the Christ within, as we call it in unity, connecting with that Christ within allows us in those times where we feel alone and feel challenged. I remember after my first divorce, interestingly enough, I felt more alone than I've ever been in my whole life. I thought I wanted to be alone at that time. I thought I didn't want to be in the relationship anymore, and it was true, I didn't want to be. It was appropriate for me to move on at that time. There's no question in my mind about that, looking back on it today. And yet, it was absolutely one of the most horrendous times of my life. I mean, it was just I wouldn't want anybody to have to go through that, even though it's something that I wanted. You know what I'm saying? It was really very, very challenging because I felt deeply alone. But one of the things that really helped me move through that and to move beyond it and to move past it is that really deep knowing of that connection I have with Spirit. And without that, I don't know that I would still be here today, to be perfectly honest. But it did help me to recognize that not only do I have a connection with that inner knowing of Spirit within myself, but that inner knowing and that connection is also a connection that I have with each of you and with all of those who are in unity, but also those people with my former wife, who is a wonderful person. And I knew that we were not to be together anymore. Does that make sense? And so it wasn't a matter it was really a matter of recognizing that no matter where I went, and it's kind of like that saying, no matter where you go, there you are. Well, you know, every Sunday we say something like that. Wherever I am, God is. And that's true in the height of my joys, and that's true in the depth of my pain. It's true whether I'm around the other side of the world. I remember walking down the streets of Moscow many years ago and just having this amazing awareness, this amazing sense that I'm in the presence of God, right here, standing next to the Kremlin. You know, these guys are supposed to, especially during that time, you know, these guys are supposed to be our enemies. And God is still there. When we recognize and wake up to that knowing, that awareness within ourselves, that no matter where we are and where we go, what we do, we not only connect into that knowing, but we are absolutely become emanators and generators of this deep connection that runs through each and every one of us. We're created in the image and after the likeness of one magnificent divine being that is at the heart of everyone in our lives, including those people that we're not going to vote for. We've had a lot of discussion about that at different times. People made it very clear about who they're not going to vote for whatever reason. But I'm going to suggest, even in the practice of not voting for whoever you're not going to vote for, I would encourage you to send light and love, even to those that you're not going to vote for. Big challenge sometimes, huh? But it is the work. It is the work that we're here to do, that we're here called to do. Connecting with others is a matter of life and death. This whole idea of the lone wolf, Gary Cooper style American hero is a perfect candidate for a heart attack. You realize that? It's not a healthy way of being. And there are champions in life that are much bigger than the legends in their own mind kind of thing. Does that make sense? Last night we saw an amazing movie called Amazing Grace. And Amazing Grace is the powerful story of William Wilberforce. How many of you have heard that name other than the ones that went to the movie last night? How many of you know who William Wilberforce is? William Wilberforce was a MP, he was in Parliament in England, and he, for I think it was like almost two decades, his whole work was to abolish slavery in England. His whole work was to abolish slavery in England. And he eventually, and this is an amazing story of how he went through the legal process of getting slavery abolished in England. And if you haven't ever seen this movie, I highly recommend it to you. But one of the things that really stood out for me is that this was an amazing, great man that hardly anybody hears about because he didn't start a revolution. In fact, when one of his friends came to him and started talking about revolution, he said, "Do not ever speak to me about revolution again. I am loyal to the king, and I am loyal to ending slavery, and we will have both. And I thought, wow, that's really powerful. It wasn't about trying to reject, it was about trying to transform. And he did so in a peaceful way. He did so in a way that brought about the changes in such a way that it was, it was a powerful transformation. Those of you who saw it last night would agree, wouldn't you? Yeah. Pretty powerful. So greatness doesn't necessarily have to do with using the power of force. We can be very forceful in our lives, can't we? But the reality is that every time we resist something, we are actually putting more energy into it. You realize that? What you resist persists. And so if you really want to make changes, you don't make changes by pushing away. You make changes by pulling toward. And so you pull toward you the love, the joy, the connection, the health, the abundance. You attract that into your experiences. You invite it in. You allow it in. Rather than trying to push away lack or fear or disease, pushing it away is not the path. It's really connecting to the reality and the truth. Well, one of the things she points out is that, one of the best medicines that we have for ourselves and our lives, for our health, our well-being, for our abundance for that matter, for our prosperity in life, is community. Having those around you that will support you in an awareness and an understanding, a vision of your possibilities is one of the most valuable things you can do. And even having people in your life to challenge you to step up, to look beyond. It's one of the greatest things you can do for your health, according to the research that's being done today. So we weren't born to be selfish. We were born to connect. We were born to give. We were born to participate. We were brought into this world to be a part of something greater than our limited selves. I came across this great quote from Russell Lake, a wonderful Unity teacher, from a wonderful book called Thank God for Prayer. If you ever had a chance to read another really good Unity book, Thank God for Prayer is a great one. He says, a natural bond of feeling exists among humankind that constantly requires reinforcement by appreciation and by approval. And along with experiencing the outflow of love within one's being. And so one of our deepest needs is to connect and to agree with each other. And the research has shown that positive emotions like happiness and negative emotions like loneliness are both socially contagious. And so when you're around people who are lifting you up, you can feel it, can't you? And when you're around people who are not lifting you up, you can feel it, can't you? Well, the truth of the matter is, it's important to recognize that when you are around people that you are lifting up, they feel it. And when you're around people that you're not lifting up, they feel it. And so one of the questions it's valuable to ask ourselves, is it safe for others to walk through the forest of my mind? Is it safe for others to walk through the forest of my mind? We all have these things going on. One of the most valuable things we can do is begin to recognize when we are allowing others to be who they are, where they are, how they are, in a way that is safe for them. And what we'll find is that when we are in a place where it's safe for others to be in the forest of our mind, it'll be very much easier for us to feel comfortable and safe in the forest of the mind of others as well. So I was reminded of how many of you, I know this is a little beyond, past some of your time, but how many of you have either seen Gilligan's Island or a rerun of Gilligan's Island? It's probably one of the longest running TV series ever, and also one of the most rerun of all TV series. But I remember an episode in Gilligan's Island where Gilligan was feeling kind of, he was feeling a little like outcast. He was trying to help people do different things, and they were all saying, no, Gilligan, go away, leave me alone, I'm trying to do this, And so he finally decides he's going to move over to the other side of the island. And he moves into a cave over on the other side of the island, and he's over there, and he's kind of feeling kind of down, lonely. And, and as the show goes on, all of the other castaways are getting together, and they're getting together for dinner, and they were talking about, well, where's Gilligan, and he's moved to the other side of the island. And before long, they're starting to talk about all the things that they miss about Gilligan, all the ways that he's, he messes up, and all the ways that he's, caring, and all the ways that, and after a while, one by one, they all decide they're going to move to the other side of the island also. And they all wind up moving into the cave with Gilligan. I thought, that not all the Gilligan Islands were touching, but this one I thought was really touching. I thought it was very touching. And I think it really is apropos of one of the things that really connects us on some level. That even though we sometimes push each other's buttons, if we didn't have those buttons to push every now and then, we'd miss them. And we'd be missed, wouldn't we? So here's a fun exercise for you to think about, to use maybe in accordance of your thoughts about being together. See, one of the things I did was, check this out for yourself, see what you think. I went and did a search in the Bible about the word together. And I think it's absolutely one of the most used words in Scripture. Together, we prayed together, and they came together. And together if you go through over and over again, everything that is talked about is done together. We are here in this world together. And so whenever you find yourself feeling alone, lonely, we do from time to time, don't we? Just begin to recognize and realize that even in that time when we are alone, ultimately we are together. And be open to the possibility of reaching out and connecting with someone else who you think might feel alone, whether in this community or out in the world. Because one of the things that happens, one of the studies that was shown, is that they hooked up people to the MRIs, I think they call them, and resonance imaging of the brain. And interestingly enough, when people connect and reach out with each other in some way in a relationship, it sets off neurons in our brains that are even more the pleasure centers than chocolate or sex. Or it actually, when you give something to someone in some way, it actually stimulates that part of the brain that makes you feel better than just about any other thing. And so when you find yourself in that place where you're feeling separate, where you're feeling isolated, find something to give to someone else. Whether it be something material, whether it be something, find some way to give of yourself. And what you will find very quickly is you're really not alone. That's our exercise and our homework for the week. And so it is. Let's move into our meditation time. So take a nice deep breath and breathe into the heart space. And as you breathe into that heart space, let the heart open to a knowing, an acknowledgement, a willingness to feel an inner connection as well as an outer connection. Place your mind, your thoughts, your awareness into the heart center. And as you put your mind in your heart, let the energy of love emanate to God, the source of all light and love and good. Just let a feeling of love and appreciation for the divine grow Let a feeling of gratitude for this connection, for this oneness, and the assurance and the knowing that you can always turn to this place. And in this place, you are never alone. And in this place, you are always all one. Let that energy of love expand in your awareness. Let yourself reach out in your thoughts, your feelings from the heart center, placing the thoughts and the mind in the heart, letting the heart energy expand and grow. And let that feeling and that energy of love and light that emanates from your heart, let it touch and surround the person to your right and to your left, in front of you and behind you. And let it expand even more, and let it begin to fill this whole room. And feel that connection with all those who come here today to share in the love and light of Spirit. And give thanks to them for being present with you in this. And now bring into your awareness all those whom you deeply love and who you are loved by. Feel that energy of love and connection. And now bring into your awareness all those wonderful people who push your buttons, who you disagree with. See them filled with an energy of love and light and wholeness and connection. And trust and know that that energy is what's returning to you. Maybe not from them specifically, but from the universe. And give thanks for being a part of this amazing connection of light and life and love, for being one in the bond. And so it is. Take a nice deep breath and give thanks for belonging wherever you are. Take another nice deep breath. And when you're ready, gently open your eyes. And so it is. Thank you, God.